You are listening to the Gigready podcast. At this value for value production, not only is our goal to give you the very best in content and the very best in information to help you become a better professional, but to also help you provide value to others. You can be a part of this podcast by sending us an email to gigready@gigrent.com, giving us your feedback, letting us know how we're doing, telling us what you want to hear. Is there something we're not talking about? Please let us know. Also, let your friends know about us. If you want to grow as a professional, if you want to grow in the live events industry, this is the place to be. Thank you so much, because this is the Gigready podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to Gigready. We're here today with a very good friend of mine, Ryan Conoco from Rock the House in Ohio, Cleveland specifically. Ryan is the chief principal over there, and we're talking virtual events, sales, how to turn leads into actual customers. Ryan, thanks for coming. Love to have you here. Thanks for being on today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Fantastic. So let's take 2 minutes real quick. Give me a rundown. 6 months ago, everything shut down. It was like someone placed a dam in front of the giant rushing tidal wave of work that was happening. Things were rocking. It was awesome. 6 months has gone by now. Give me an idea of what you guys have done to move from full in-person live events straight into the virtual digital world.
Yeah, totally. I'll take you through it and I'll give you our story and I'll kind of explain how we ended up doing what we're doing, which right now is today we had 3 events. Last week we had 10 simultaneous streams going on Thursday. So, don't get me wrong. I don't want to candy coat what's been a tough situation. This has been tough for all of us. Our company is way, way down, just like every other audiovisual company in the country. And unfortunately, we have had a downscale part of our staff. But we've worked hard and we're hustlers and we are really developing and putting out new products through this. So, definitely happy to explain what we're doing, how we're getting there, and what's been selling. I always say on a good day, I'm a bad technician. So I'll tell you a little bit more of the front of house, how we're getting the clients, how we're converting them. And I'll try not to sound silly when I talk about the tech.
No, that's fine. In fact, the tech, even though it is so critical, I think one of the big things I've noticed is that 80% of a virtual event is not in the event itself, but it's actually everything that happens before. Maybe not 80, but close. Like there's a ton of work that goes into preparing it. And then once you're going, computers, some switchers, and everybody's doing their thing. Am I wrong about that, or is that pretty close?
No, I think you're totally right. I think when you get into the virtual venues and the virtual platforms, so not just streaming an RTMP feed, but when you're looking at your things like Excel event, Pathable, Hoppin, Remo, V fairs, socio. I think there's some funky ghosts that are living in those systems. So I think there's some tech that does need to be understood. But really, when you're handling most of your core webinar stuff and your main streams, the tech is pretty cut and dry. And there hasn't been a ton of groundbreaking changes. While there's been fun little updates and widgets, it's a pretty simple principle. The planning has become more important than ever for us. In a world where, really qualified technicians used to be able to, maybe your lead would pop in a few days early, start to figure out the show, do your pull sheet, and, your technicians could pop from show to show. The planning now and understanding exactly what's going to happen because you are more in a broadcast setting and having the graphics, the shots, the understanding of how to route it. Our planning time has went through the roof. It's probably one of the things early on we significantly underestimated. And it definitely hurt us because you can't go back to clients and say, well, this is a new product. We had no idea it was going to take this much time.
Yeah.
So we got burned a little bit on that early on. For those of you that aren't doing a ton of virtual events, whatever you think you need for labor, double it. Whatever time you think you're going to have into it, double it. They are extremely time consuming. A, because of the planning, but B, because they're so new to the clients. Your clients are checking in constantly. They're asking for extra meetings just to touch base. Where more traditional AV, a lot of our senior planners kind of knew what they were getting into. These clients have no idea. So they really need a lot more hand holding. And that's going to separate, the successful events versus the non because of their comfort level.
Makes sense. So what don't they know? What are the things that they don't know that they're constantly checking in with you on?
They don't know what they're supposed to provide versus what you're supposed to provide. And depending on what day you ask me, I don't know if I know what they're supposed to provide versus what we're supposed to provide. So there's this gray line where I think, so it all depends on what is your virtual event. So, let's start at the beginning. Everyone's defining a virtual event differently. How are you defining it? Like, do you have a definition that you're using?
To me, a virtual event is anything that comes to me on a screen that is actually either live or webinar. So training or sales meeting or anything where someone is communicating information to another individual on the other end of a screen, and it's not a video on YouTube. It's not a pre-record on Vimeo. It's actually like we're doing it.
Okay, cool. And that's totally a way. And I think for a lot of clients, they say that, and I get into conversations all the time where people are like, we want to do this virtual event. And all of a sudden it's like, that's just video conferencing. And they're like, yeah, but we want to make it an event. So I think there's totally a thought process. And at Rock the House, we have a few different silos and market segments. We do have some people that are working really in what I call managed video conferencing, which is, adding some flair to video conferencing, finding ways to do it, finding ways to excel in it. There's some fun platforms out there that actually really are assisting well with that. If anybody hasn't demoed yet, and it's spelled exactly like it sounds, MMHMM, wicked fun software that they're developing for video conferencing that allows you to share in the original pitch, and they've added some great stuff to it since, was, make your webinar look like you're on Weekend Update on SNL. So it lets you jump around the screen. It lets you look transparent. It lets you bring decks up in nicer areas. So it is kind of managed that. But to get to the core question, and you know what? I think what was the thing that competed against PowerPoint years ago? Prezi.
Prezi, yeah.
I think Prezi has their version of it. I remember seeing it. I apologize, it was a while ago, but you might want to check out Prezi too. So for me, what do I say when I say a virtual event?
Yeah.
I work mostly in the meeting and conference segment. So the term that I use when a virtual event is, I say it is an event that tries to mimic traditional event attributes, mostly in the arena of education, engagement, and commerce. So up until a couple of weeks ago, I was saying networking instead of engagement. And then I realized that everybody's asking for a networking. What can we do to network? But when you really dive in with your clients, most of them don't actually need it. They're just looking for engagement.
Yeah.
They're looking for cool ways for people to interact, things that are a little bit different than just a chat bar. And I think if you replace that networking with engagement, it really gives you a broad spectrum of saying, okay, what's education? Education is my main stage, my GS. It's my breakout rooms. It's an area for people to download, white pages or download different material that is tied to that person. It's maybe a video on demand. I talk a lot with my clients, and Quibi is a term I love using because it's the new little fun, streaming app.
Yeah.
But it stands for quick bites. So, I talk to my clients and I say, what are we doing to, give something Quibi? What are we doing to give people a chance to maybe not sit through an hour-long session, but to have a 5-minute bite for here, a 5-minute bite for here? So education for me, keynote, breakouts, and then these kind of little bites. These maybe pre-recorded videos that are on one specific thing. Freeman a couple years ago started selling that product where they had the huge LED wall they would set up. And I think I saw it at PCMA, and I don't know if they ever actually sold it or if it was a concept. But the idea was that people would record these small videos, and if you didn't like what was going on the main stage, you could tune in to these small videos and stay interested. It's kind of a fun idea. Anyways, so then you go to engagement. Engagement can be networking, and for some events, networking is huge. And a lot of the platforms you can engage with people. I've become a pretty big Slido fan. Slido's great. Kahoot is great. And I think while we're using them now, when we switch to hybrid events, which we can circle back to in a little bit, I think when the industry switches from this 100% virtual to hybrid, those are going to become even more impactful. And then the last thing I look at with clients is commerce. And commerce, to me, generally covers anything we want them to buy, any sort of trade show exhibit hall we have, and any sort of sponsorship responsibilities we have.
Got it.
So when you stack all of those, and they don't have to have all of them, but I kind of look at a virtual event by saying it's something that's mimicking that. If not, maybe it's just a meeting. Maybe it's just a webinar. I feel like webinars got a dirty name during all of this, where people thought webinars were just like somebody on Zoom or somebody on Teams talking to you. And webinars can be beautiful and engaging and have tons of great content. And they can have full production and AV companies.
Yeah.
Somehow the webinar, the name, I don't know if it's going to come out. It might be something that we'll just have to call it something different because clients don't have a real positive picture of it right now.
Trash the name webinar and come up with something.
It's the same thing, but who knows? Because there can be beautiful webinars, but when you say webinar, clients like, I don't want a webinar. I want a virtual event. Like, it's a single screen show with no commerce, no engagement.
Yeah.
It is a webinar.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I want to get rid of the virtual name and go to digital. I feel like virtual doesn't really cover what we're actually doing, my personal opinion. But I don't think I'm going to win that. I don't think I'm going to win that game because virtual is like the name that everybody has gone to now. And so
the ship may have sailed on that one, but we'll see here. You find a group that will replace webinar. I'll find a group that will replace virtual. We'll team up and change the world.
Perfect. I love it. Let's go all the way to the start. And most people would say the start is, okay, we're going to start planning. But I'm looking at even back before that. Like, if you didn't have anyone right now, if you didn't have a single customer, what would you do to start finding customers for the virtual event platform or Zoom or Teams or whatever you're looking to do to create revenue for Rock the House right now?
So let's go back a step even further than that. Why are we doing virtual events? Why have we decided that we are going to invest time and resource and all of these things to keep people on payroll? I have a lot of friends in markets that just went, it's not worth it, man. Close up the business, ride it out. Your cash will get you through a year. Have zero payroll, zero, your expenses will be almost nothing, pop out on the other end. So why do all this work in the first place? So you have to decide, because if I'm answering your question, I'm answering, would I choose to get into the live event industry today in the middle of a pandemic? And I can give you a resounding hell no. But I am, and this is where I've spent 20 years, and it's where I'm going to spend the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So let's make something of it.
Yep.
Why are we doing virtual events? We're doing virtual events for a few reasons. We're doing virtual events, first of all, because Rock the House had an amazing year in 2010 and 11. And for those guys that are a little bit older listening to this, they're going to go, those were awful years. How did you guys manage to do all right? Well, if you don't know the history of Rock the House, we started as bar mitzvah DJs. And after a series of years, we ended up with a ton of gear and a ton of really qualified guys to set it up. And then all of a sudden somebody called us and they said, we want that energy, that style, that show that you brought. But instead of it being on a Saturday night, we want it on a Wednesday, and we don't need a DJ. We just want the other stuff. And we were like, there's weekday work? Like, what is it? this is so cool. You can make money on Wednesdays. And so 2009 economic downturn, we come out of it, and you had a ton of AV providers who didn't stay up with their clients when they said, we have to cancel our event this year. We don't have a budget for an event this year. Our budgets have been cut in half. And you had a lot of AV providers that didn't find a way to stay with their clients, to say, you know what, we're your partner. We're going to fight through this for you. We don't care about the big checks we got in the past. We care about taking care of you and coming out on the other side of this with you. So for all of those people that didn't happen, 2 years later, you've got a different cycle. Money's coming back. And we got a chance to bid on a lot of events that, had that not happened and had people stayed in front of their clients, we would have never had a chance to bid on.
Mm-hmm.
Because people were writing, you were around back then. A lot of clients are writing blank checks to the same guys every year. Thanks so much. You've done a great job. We don't really care about the budget. Make it happen.
Yeah.
But a lot of those companies didn't stay in front of their clients. So our number one goal doing virtual events was to stay in front of every client, to let every client know we will be with you and we will find a way, no matter what your company is going through during COVID, to tell your story. Nonprofit's a big part of us, to get your message out there, to allow people to donate, to get your sales team together. So all of those things is why we chose to go into it. So, I know that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but staying in front of the clients is the single most important thing.
Yeah.
The second thing, and, I'm not recommending that everybody go poach their competitors' clients, but if you know that the show you've always wanted in town belongs to a guy that put a gone fishing sign on the door and you're not, well, guess what? You're going to get a chance to get it in the virtual segment. And when we come out of this, you're going to be the company that stood with those people and that they said, we had such a great experience virtually with you. Maybe we'll give you a chance to bid it live. You're not guaranteed the work. Nobody's guaranteed the work. Maybe you'll have a chance to really bid it and to look and be part of that show when it goes back to live. And, just like 99 or 2009 shows that maybe you would have never gotten a chance to before. Huh. So I thought I'd throw that out just to kind of why we were doing it and why these are attractive. We are not getting rich doing virtual events. We are keeping our guys working. We are keeping some gear working. We are staying in front of our clients. And I work as much on the business side as I, do on any other. Cash flow is so important right now. We need to see cash entering our accounts and leaving our accounts.
Yeah.
So just the idea of the cash flow makes these really attractive. So, okay, now I'll answer your question. Reword it for me one more time so I don't mess it up. What was your exact question?
That answer was fantastic. That's probably more the answer I was looking for anyway.
Okay, cool.
But, and just kind of in retrospect for me, through our relationship, I don't know if you've ever picked up on it, but most of our clients are sub-rental clients. Like that's what we do. And so we were not in the place to suddenly just tell our clients, hey, we're doing, we can handle your virtual events now, because suddenly that's what they're doing because, they don't need all the extra gear that they don't own, for doing stuff. So, your answer is fantastic. And I love that. And I think that it's critical for us to remember that, one, if somebody puts a gone fishing sign on the door, you're not poaching anybody. They said, you know what, for now we're hanging up our coat and we're not going to keep doing what we're doing because we don't see any value in it. And, companies want to see people that believe in them, that see value in maintaining those relationships, even if they're not getting something from it. And I think that that's very important, in this day and age. As same thing. I'm continuing to reach out to people that I know. I may not be able to do anything for them, but just find out how people are doing, keeping touch, making sure that they understand that we're still here, that we're still doing stuff, and keeping in front of them is incredibly important.
Totally.
The question I guess that I asked was so you said, all right, I'm here. I need to keep in touch with my clients. From the start, how are you finding or discovering these virtual events that people need to have or want to have because they're not doing in-person events? Did you just put a sign on the front door that says, hey, we can take your live event and make it virtual? Or was there a lot of legwork that you went through to find those people that aren't your current clients?
It was a hybrid of a couple of things. So first thing we did is realized we had never done a virtual event before. We had never, other than the occasional bringing in a remote guest or the occasional streaming of something for CE credits for a medical conference, we never really played in that segment. So we went ahead and decided we needed to learn this and we needed to do it fast. This was on a Sunday in April. We decided, how can we learn this and get up to speed fast and get some cash in? Yeah. So we said, what market segment needs us? That probably is pretty easy to work with and we probably can't screw up. And that was virtual graduations.
Okay.
So on Sunday, we decided it. Monday, we built a deck for it so our sales guys could do presentations. And we started reaching out to people that could get us email lists of principals. And we went ahead and what did we end up with? It had to have been 30,000 principal email addresses nationwide.
Wow.
We ended up picking 5 states to go after: California, Florida, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio. Maybe Pennsylvania was in there too. Maybe it was 6. And we just started blasting people saying, your graduation's going virtual. Let us help you get there. And we were doing sales presentations of products we had never sold, but we needed to get comfortable with it and asking the questions and figuring it out. And we knew that most of these are markets we don't play in and clients that would never call us. So kind of nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And we ended up booking in a 45-day period. We did, I think the final number was like 76, 77 virtual graduations.
Wow.
It was absolutely insane. About a dozen of them were regional and they were hybrids where we were bringing in LED walls. The other 60 plus or whatever it worked out to be were strictly streaming graduations. So first thing we did is we learned how to do the product. We learned how to ask questions and we learned in a market segment that we really couldn't screw up. So what's the equivalent now? Because graduations, that's what we did.
Yeah.
There's so many that are out there. I think you're going to see a lot of, think of the arts. I think you're going to see a lot of dance studios that want to find a way to stream, Becky's 5-year-old ballet. I was talking to a friend of mine today and she said for the first time in 40 years, this company's not doing the Nutcracker this year. There's going to be a need for these studios that are down in revenue, whether they're, competitive show choir, whether it's this, like that kind of same youth family-based stuff, whole market's down, gymnastics, all those things. I think I would cut my teeth on there if you don't know what if you're already a pro, man, skip this step. But what this allowed us to do is front of house, learn how to ask questions, learn how to listen, learn how to steer them, learn how, in the old days when somebody said, hey, and that thing, can you throw that in for me? Because I wanted it. You'd be like, whatever, another case of lights on the truck. Yeah, I got you. You learned that when you said yes to that in virtual, it may be 10 hours of work. It's not just some lights that are sitting on your shelf. Yeah. So you learned what to say yes to, and you learned what to say definitely no to. And you learned that the hard way. So from there, you've got it. Then I'd go after, the clients I can go after. We got really lucky with some associations that had multiple events. So sell it once, produce it 5 times is always a better model.
Yeah.
So we went after some associations that we knew that had series of events. And we said to them, and I really meant this, I was hoping I was going to get the work, but I said, you've got 5 events coming up in this like 6-week period or whatever it was. You don't want to work with 5 or 6 different providers. I know you like to spread the work around. I know you like to, give your money to different organizations. Don't do it. There's such a learning curve in virtual. Stick with one person for this 2 month. And then when you come up for air, decide if you want to do it again. So, I'd look for people with multiple events. For us as a sub-rent, man, it's tough. I don't know. Sub-rent would be a brutal game to be in right now. And I'm sure it is. My heart goes out to you and,
there's nothing. It's big fat goose egg at the moment. So
yeah, like it's, I'm trying to think, when was the last time I sub-rented something? You know what? I needed a live view unit a few weeks ago, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's been few and far between.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would do. I'd go after it. People are visual, and they don't know what they're looking at now. So when it comes to live events, while I do think having great photos of your events and, pretty decks and all those things are really important, in virtual, they need to be able to see something.
Okay.
So do a fake event, do something that you can record, do something where you can show graphics. When I do demos, I'm not a technician, so I use StreamYard, but I grab the Zoom, I show it and I can take them through very basic graphics.
Yeah.
And I explain, here's what I'm able to do as a non-technician. When our techs get here, they can customize this by tenfold.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. So what are you, so you find a market segment, like you said, they're visual. So what else are you, give me a little idea of what the dog and pony show looks like when you get in front of them and you're telling them, here's what we can do. And those examples, are you just showing them, hey, we can do a pip and we can do this and we can do that? Or are you really helping them understand how to use the event to engage differently than they would in the live sense?
So I talk about, three main things. I talk about like inside the screen. I talk about outside the screen, which is kind of your general engagement, all of those other things. And then for us, if the client's regional, we had a lot of LED tiles sitting on a shelf getting dusty. So we have a training room here that we were able to build out and make that a virtual studio. So whether they think they were calling about it or not, everybody gets the virtual studio demo.
Got it.
But when I talk about inside the screen, when I talk about, because you have to explain to the client, no matter what, they're like, I want all this cool. At the end of the day, somebody is looking at a video player.
Yep.
So when I talk about what happens inside the screen, first I talk about visual. And that's where I'm showing what a lower third is, what ticker tape looks like, what a pip is, how when you hire an AV company, we're not having people share their screens, but we're bringing in the graphics as a separate input, and therefore we can size it during the show, make it larger, smaller. I talk about, remote clickers because those are always fun. And I talk about really how to make that a thing. Then I talk about outside the screen. Now, what's interesting is, as an AV house, you might have nothing to do with what happens outside that player, but as part of a virtual event, you better be ready to talk about it. So I have demo platforms and a couple of the different softwares out there that are virtual environments. So I usually jump in and I explain to somebody the difference between a robust, robust webinar platform, something like did I lose you? No, that was weird. Something like an On24 or a Brand.live. And then I go ahead and I take them through what are the more complete virtual environments, something like Excella events, Pathable, Grip, Hoppin, VFairs.
Are these the virtual venues?
It's here's the thing. People started saying, platform, and I still use the word platform a lot, but what I try to tell a client fairly early on, and it seems to work, I say, don't think of it as a platform, think of it as a venue. Because sometimes they'll ask, well, why do I have to pay them and you? And I say, well, you paid the Hilton last year and you paid me. Why wouldn't you pay for the venue as me as well? And when they start to think about it as a venue, then you kind of become more of an advisor on it and less of the person they think is running it at all times.
Okay.
And I'll leave it to you guys. If you are a full producer or a turnkey solution and you want to be running those, go ahead. For us, we're running a little hard and a little fast right now, and a little bit lean on staff to want to be able to be the ones managing those venues always. And then people start always asking, well, what is Zoom? And, why aren't I just using Zoom? And, you versus Zoom. And I will credit my dear friend, Aaron Cobb down in Texas for this line. Aaron said, tell them that Zoom is just like stage decks. And I started to explain to clients, Zoom is just a series of stage decks. Just like any venue, we roll on the stage and you stand on it. That's all Zoom is. Zoom is just where your presenters are standing. And once you start to understand that the platform is just a venue, and whether you're using Zoom or live stream to bring people in, or StreamYard, or I think vMix, you can bring people in, whatever or Teams or whatever you want to bring people in, think of it as just a bunch of stage right decks. Because that's all it is. It's just what they're standing on. But everything that happens around it, at a live event, the hotel gives you stage decks. So why do you bring in an AV company? Well, because there's a lot of stuff that's not just the stage decks that needs to happen.
Here you go. Here's a deck. Stand on this. Do your event.
Yeah, have a great show. Peace. But when you start to think of it in there, it makes a lot of sense. And then I talk about engagement, and you sprinkle some fairy dust on some stuff.
Can you send a box of that fairy dust to Denver for me?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, yeah, I talk about, what are your goals for engagement? Is it just, is it chats? Is it Q&As? You always, in every sales call I do, whether they say they get it or not, I have to say, do you understand the difference between video conferencing and streaming? Do you understand the difference between one-to-one or one-to-many? Because everybody says they do, but then they keep asking for video conferencing as part of streaming, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to draw that line. So I always start with it, just to be like, hey, I just want to put this out there just to make sure we're on the right path.
Got it. So streaming being only going one direction, conferencing going both directions.
Totally. One-to-many versus one-to-one. And then I always say the easiest way that I like people to remember it is video conferencing is you're all sitting around a boardroom table. Streaming is you are standing on a stage and you have an audience watching you.
Got it. Okay. Very cool.
And then you start to build it out from there.
What do you find is
that's my first phase?
Yeah. What do you find is the most requested type right now? Streaming or conferencing?
Oh man, it's streaming, but they want all the fun perks of conferencing. They're like, no, we want it totally streaming. We want to make sure we have control over everybody. We really want one person presenting, but if so-and-so asks a good question, I'd love for them to be able to pop up on the screen next to the person with a lower third and this and that. I'm like, during a live event, you've got a live gen sesh for 3,000 people. When was the last time a good question meant you could run up to the stage, jump on, we had your headshot ready, your lower graphics ready to jump up? It doesn't work in live. It's not going to work in virtual.
Yeah.
And yes, there are ways. Yes, there are. Somebody that asks a good question, you could send them a remote. Like, I understand the back end technology to make it happen. It's just not encouraged.
Yeah.
But that's where I think you can show them, the difference between the virtual venues and platforms, because they all kind of have their own widgets. And then, we have found it successful saying, if you want it to be more streamlined, go ahead and just use Slido.
Got it.
Because there's some fun stuff there. A lot of the shows we're doing, we are producing the full gen sesh. And then within the breakouts, most of the virtual venues have some sort of broadcast player, or you can integrate Zoom into the breakouts. So we are saying for breakouts, if it's not in your budget to have a technician in every room, once again, just like an in-person event, do you want us to have a floating technician that pops in and out or is on call, or do you want a dedicated technician? So if they have a dedicated technician, we can do a little bit more with engagement.
Yeah.
If not, we're a little bit more limited to just, it is what it is. And Zoom's done some great stuff on the back end where you can jump in and out of different rooms. You can help people troubleshoot. You can get into anybody's computer and check out their up and they're down, their CPU usage. And Zoom, I came kind of full circle with Zoom. I think I was telling you this the other day.
Yeah.
I came full circle with Zoom. At the beginning of this, I was kind of like, we're a pro company. Zoom is very prosumer. We shouldn't be using Zoom. We can only be using. If you are using a live stream link or a vMix link or something and your presenters can't get into it and there's an issue, I promise you, your client looks at it as it's your fault. You made it too hard. You made it too difficult. Your software doesn't work. If you're like, I sent them a Zoom link and they didn't know what Zoom was. Well, then then it's right back on your presenter, and like nobody thinks you did anything wrong. What do they say? If people want chocolate ice cream, give them chocolate ice cream.
That's true.
Yeah, there's better things out there. They're going to give you a little bit higher resolution. So maybe your top things when you have more control. But if you're doing, we just did a diversity conference where we had, panelists after panel after panel after panel. We send one Zoom room out. And when I say Zoom room, Zoom's another vernacular. We're going to rewrite everyone's vernaculars today. Zoom rooms are actually their installed video conferencing that for permanent installation. Zoom meeting is what we all know, but
Got it.
everybody calls it Zoom room.
Okay.
So we set up a Zoom meeting or a Zoom room, whatever you want to call it, as a green room. Every presenter goes in there, and then we just peel them out with other links as we need them.
Got it.
We have found that more successful than an email with 10 different links for people.
Got it. Yeah, click on this, and then at 10:15, click on this one to then go.
And to be really clear, how did we figure that out? We had some really rough shows.
Ooh, well, I'm glad you're through that. What do you find is selling your clients on doing a virtual event right now versus waiting and hoping that live events can come back in the next 6 to 8 months?
The same reason that I'm doing virtual events. They don't want to miss. They can't even talk today. There you go. Same reason I'm doing virtual events. They don't want to miss a cycle.
Yeah.
And that's what I say to them. They're like, well, we're not sure if we want to do this. And I was like, do you really want to miss a cycle with your sales team when they need more support than they've ever had before because they're selling differently than they ever had?
Yeah.
Do you really want to miss a segment with your donors where everyone's going to be banging on your donors wall? Do you really want to miss a segment with your clients when they don't really know what's going on and you can show them your new products? Missing a cycle will kill you. Just like I don't want my clients to go away for a year if I'm making money or not on these events. I don't think our clients want their audience to go away for a year.
Yeah.
So that's the number one selling point that we tend to go with.
Huh. Okay. I like that. That works really well. Missing a segment is huge, especially when it comes to sales. You mentioned earlier that you were talking about education, engagement, commerce. Do you find that most virtual events need or want to have all three, or are there ones where you're really only focused on one segment versus all three?
No, I mean, the most common is education. And depending on your event, education is just the show. It's your main screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the most common. From there, I think everybody likes a piece of engagement. And engagement doesn't have to be networking, but people, man, they got to get off this networking train. But the engagement of two-way communication, and that's what I kind of use to fight against. People are like, well, video conferencing. I'm like, no, but we can do engagement.
Yeah.
We can find ways where your audience can still feel part of the show. Commerce is big because usually there's somebody underwriting these things. So either you've got sponsors you've got to recognize, you've got exhibit halls that want to show their wares, you've got something that people want to sell, even in an internal event, because a lot of internal events are underwritten by, hey, I spend a lot of money with you every year. I'm having my staff meeting. I need you to go ahead and, give me $5,000, $10,000, whatever.
Yeah.
They like seeing the website shout out. They like seeing their logos. Even if the clicks aren't super high, it ends up becoming really important. I told a lot of clients, God, I haven't said this in a while. This was like one of my early, I go through ups and downs with lines that I say, but early I was talking a lot about how as an event community, and I would tell this to planners and to clients, we have a responsibility right now to over deliver in the virtual environment to our sponsors. Mm-hmm. And I would say that because so many sponsors are really nervous and weary, and they're like, I'm not sure I'm going to get value. And I'm like, we had this responsibility to over deliver because we don't know how long COVID is going. And we don't know if events are going back to in-person or if they're going to go back to hybrid. And we want to make sure that all of these check writers, and in every city, it's the same. It's, your big national companies, and then more regionally, it's your banks, it's your hospitals, it's the people that write those checks often. We want to make sure that they're not so soured from writing a big check and being under-delivered in the virtual environment that they're like, oh, virtual, yeah, we're going to tap out of that one.
Huh. What are you finding is actually selling Um, I'm trying to think of how to make this question a little bit different than the last one, but what is getting people to sign on the dotted line and say, okay, yes, we are going to move forward. We are going to do this, and then getting them to, cut that check and boom, away you go.
Um, that's a really tough one. I'm trying to think of what's really close to them. I had a client the other day call and they said, hey, we spoke with you. Your pricing was a little bit higher than we were comfortable with. This is a client that I think we did work for 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they went to a less expensive provider. And they asked that we do a demo this year. Nice people. I knew they were going to shop it. And they came back and said, you guys were the most expensive out there, but you also seemed like you knew what you were talking about more than anyone else. And because nobody else could really convince us they knew what they were talking about, we're going to give you the work, even though you're stretching our budget a bit. So, I think being able to show mastery in the craft, even though it's such a new craft, I mean, no one's lying and saying, we've been doing virtual for 20 years, but, showing that we got in early, our studio did well. We're constantly talking about on our social. We have, I would say we're mid-size on social media. We're about 10,000 followers on Facebook. And we've been doing a very good job of just constantly blasting out there. And while a lot of other people, one of the first people you let go in times like this, because leads are down, you let your marketing team go.
Yeah.
For those of you that had to let your marketing teams go, or your marketing consultant, or however you did it, a lot of your socials are getting really dry. And we just made sure that we were constantly blasting it out there. And people would say, we're seeing you're doing all this stuff. We just assume you're the specialist now in the region for it. And we're like, why, yes, we are.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
I gotta slap my hand now. My social has been so horrible. It's like you're right. It's practically non-existent, and that's totally on me. So
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I hate that stuff. Like, I'm like the most not so like, for any of you that are friends with me on social, I'll post every now and then when I'm with my brothers or something hanging out. But I don't really post a lot of work stuff. My partner happens to be awesome at it. But we've really went ahead and focused on making sure that we're constantly telling the story. And the story isn't that we do virtual. The story is that we're here and that we're fighting. Because people are going, are they even in business for a lot of these companies? And the story we're showing is our staff eating pizza and us partying after a virtual event and us rearranging our virtual studio, our building out our LED wall. All of these things that are just showing we're here and we're ready for whatever you guys need. We'll find a way to serve you.
Yeah. Very cool. It's definitely an interesting time that we live in with the changes, the adjustments. It's just totally crazy. My brain is rolling around as I'm listening to you talk. I'm like, okay, what are the things we need to do? What are the things that we need to execute on? Because really, I've realized for ourselves as a sub rental company, we have to change the game, and I refuse to sit here and say, okay, well, we're just going to lay everybody off and hope that I can do some sub rentals to people doing virtual events and see if that maybe helps us go for another 12 months before we really start seeing uptick. Like you mentioned, I feel a huge responsibility to the people, the guys, the girls that work for me, and are a part of my team to continue to figure out a way to innovate so that we can be successful and not be like many of the companies that have said, oh, well, we're just going to hang up our hat and not do these or hope that other stuff's going to come back sooner. You mentioned that in Cleveland, there's some companies that did just that. Do you think that they're just going to last it out? Will they end up, going out of business? What do you think is going to happen in that side of things?
I won't talk about Cleveland directly. I was more talking regionally when I said that, made that comment earlier. But I've heard statistics that anywhere from 25 to 50% of our industry is going to shrink. I hope it's not that much. Some people say the big companies will fall. Some people say the small single ops will have to get jobs because their wives will make them. Here's the thing. Everybody's broke on a different level. So, the big guys have big overhead, the medium guys have overhead that feels really big because that's where I live.
Yeah.
And, the small single ops, they're using it to support their families. So, do I think they're all going to come back? No, unfortunately not. I think, and also from a business sense, and I know it's not our, what we're here to talk about today, I think I have no ego when it comes to ownership. Ownership's just a thing. I think it's a really good time for companies to either really evaluate, do they want to buy someone else or do they want to be bought? And, don't worry about the cash. Like, you can figure out how to make that work if the deal's right. But I think, from a lot of businesses, this is time to either be buying or be selling your business.
Interesting.
And selling could mean becoming partners with somebody. It could mean teaming up and coming stronger out of here. But anyone that just kind of rides this out and just like, well, yeah, no real changes. We wrote it out. We got our cash, we had enough cash to get through, and now we're going to do the exact same thing. I don't know. I don't know how many years post-COVID they'll be with us.
What do you think are a couple of critical things that people are going to need to do coming out of this when we start looking at virtual and live at the same time? I think that once people realize that they have so much more reach with virtual, it's no longer going to be acceptable to say, oh yeah, just throw the side screen feed and send it on the webcast. And that's the deal now. Where do you see it going long term?
Totally. That's such a great point. I'll bring Quibi up again, not even because I love their programming, because I don't even watch a lot of TV. But there's some of the first shows that were directly shot for mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And what's fun is you can turn your phone and follows, and they do some cool stuff. But yeah, the idea of saying, what is our mobile experience going to look like? What me as a guy that comes from like uber clean, I like very crisp stuff. It's why VFairs, clients love VFairs, does nothing for me because it looks like you're in The Sims and it's not my vibe. But like when clients want it, game on. It's just not what I would buy. But
yeah,
same thing with live shows. If I walked into a live show and I saw some wing screens that had ticker tapes and lower thirds and bugs and borders, I would go, oh my God, that's way too much stuff. Get all that off there. Like uber clean. Why are you having all of that stats? It looks like election night on CNN. Like, get that all off the screen. But that's exactly what people want in the virtual segment. So your switch is going to be different. The big thing that I don't know what's going to happen is, where's this money going to come from? Because we're going to be asked to do more with less. Clients are going to say, hey, I want that same big show we did a couple years ago back pre-COVID, but I want it to be cooler because it's been a couple years and we got to let them know we're back with a bang. But also, we're going to be a hybrid event now. So 1/3 of our guests are going to be virtual. We need to make sure they have a really great custom experience. And by the way, our sponsors haven't bounced back yet, so you've got to do it for 20% less. And we're all going to be like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how we're going to get there. So it's going to be interesting. AV budgets really got high the last couple of years as companies started to grow and people were dedicating more and more portions of their events to it. I just don't know how much can be squeezed.
Yeah.
Or if as AV providers, we're going to have to say, it was awesome doing, 70-foot wide LED walls or, crazy blends, but maybe we will have to simplify a bit to go ahead and to be able to afford to give that virtual experience that will become necessary. I don't think I said it here. I say it all the time, and I know I've said it to you, but I tell everybody it's like a pendulum.
Yep.
And our pendulum was all the way to the right. We were 100% in-person events. The pendulum is now swung all the way to the left to 100% virtual. Well, pendulums don't swing all the way back to where they started.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. The pendulum will swing back, but it will still have this huge segment that we will now have to fill with virtual and in person. So the game has changed. The die has been cast. The pendulum has been thrown, whatever you want to call. Now we've just got to react. And the companies that react best will write the future of our industry. And the companies that don't retain clients until they don't,
Yeah. Interesting. Until that client wants what, that other guy that has that bigger, better thing has. And then they go to the company that is providing the bigger, better thing because they say we want that instead of what we had last time. And then, then they move. That's part of the game.
And, I'm going to challenge you for a minute because you said something. I smiled when you said it. I've never thought about this before. I used to always say, yeah, what's the next bigger, better thing? Bigger, better thing. I wonder if it's going to be bigger, better, or if it's just going to be better, better. I wonder if with everything changing, if they're going to say our counts are down by 50%, our budgets are this, if people are going to, maybe they will. Maybe people always want bigger, better. But I'm wondering if they'll give us the opportunity to just show them better, better.
Yeah.
Here's your better virtual experience. Here's your better in-person experience. And it may not be bigger.
Yeah. No, I think you make a great point there. One of the ideas that I've thought about coming out of this is that there's actually going to be more labor positions needed on smaller shows because of the virtual digital components that are going to have to happen. You're going to need a different video director. You're going to need another graphics, slash, vMix operator that's dealing with the stream and the virtual participants and the different breakouts and all the things that come along with that. Like that it requires people. AI can't solve that problem. And so in the long run, I think that for us, I see us being less events, but the same amount of labor needed to make those happen. Now, again, your comment about money earlier, maybe that money comes from decreased hotel spend or, decreased capacity. So instead of doing the 700 rooms they were doing last time for 4 days, they're now doing 400 rooms, and that money is shifted. And so, that comes out of F&B, that comes out of hotel stays, that comes out of, that's a significant amount of money when you start piling on that many people.
Let's hope so, man. I hope it works like that. I love that. Yeah, I love that. The labor is going to be an interesting game because I don't know if there's anybody listening right now whose most profitable source of their company is labor. But if it is, please call me. I would love to know how you do it. I would love to know how you make lots of money on labor because in 20 years, I have not figured that out.
Yeah.
So it means that when we're spending more on labor, there's more labor positions. They're taking away gear. Gear, I do know how to make money on.
Yeah.
But when they don't need the gear, eventually, I don't know if that's going to have to change our whole price point, if we're going to have to start charging for planning or engineering or designing or stuff that we never did in the past, because we come from a world where, yes, we do charge for any creative we have to design. But at the end of the day, rent enough gear and pay our guys and everything else is kind of free.
Yeah.
I wonder if that world's going to come to an end and we're going to have to find other ways to generate revenue for the organization as shows become so much more labor heavy and so much more gear light.
Yeah, I think one of the correlations that one of the consultants that I work with, or that I've known, I should say, that he's made is the correlation when you go from the live events industry to the installation and integration side of things. And the installation integration, they charge for every single little step. You're building out a rack. There's a line item on a quote that says rack build 10 hours at whatever that cost is. I think it's going to be critical for people to begin to price that in, because you can't just put a line item that says prep for 5 days for lighting, because on that, if you have a 5-day prep for lighting, you've also got video prep, you've also got audio prep. Maybe it's time to start putting those things in there, because you can't soak those costs with decreased equipment rental. You can't soak that cost out of all the labor, especially when you've only got, $100 a day on a guy. If you're doing a day rate, for instance, it just doesn't work. And, the consultant I was working with, he recommended we need to start raising labor rates. My concern with that, though, is that then you get the clients to start to push back and say, hey, $900 a day for a high res guy is a little much. And so it's going to take time for that scale to move, for us to be able to make those changes, because they just don't, clients push back. And sometimes I think people are ignorant to that. People just, oh, well, just raise rates. It's no problem. Well, there's a lot more complication to that than just, hey, I'm, tacking another $100 a day on for this guy because I want to.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
It's gonna be crazy, man. I mean, like I said, we are going to the industry will reinvent itself, and those that choose will be part of that reinvention.
yeah. Well, I for one am excited about the reinvention, even though I'm not quite sure how I'm going to fit into it yet or what that's exactly going to look like. I know that my company's role is going to change, and that we're going to have to work really, really hard to stay in the game and continue to be profitable in the long term because everything's going to shift. So hopefully, as we keep talking about it, we'll find more opportunities to create and make revenue and find those things. One last question talking about sponsors you mentioned. What are some things you're seeing people do with sponsors to help them feel that extra love than just, hey, we're going to put your logo up for an extra 10 seconds on the screen when we're in between presenters or something like that? What are some things people are doing?
Yeah, totally. Let me take you through that. And I'll give you something else that's made me think of. So the first I was like, actually, we developed this great sponsorship sheet that we send out to people showing them how they can integrate sponsors better into their live events. And I remembered I don't send it to everybody now because we finally got to the point where I never wanted to get to this point, but part of what the client is hiring us for now is really our IP. I've stopped doing, and I know some AV companies stopped this years ago, even with in person, but we're a flex house. My quotes look like, here's the flex gear you're getting. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I know how to put it together. My virtual event quotes are a lot more vague. While I'm outlining, the parameters and the scope of work, I won't do 8 intake calls anymore because eventually you really are giving them the keys to know what's out there. Because a lot of times we're using softwares now that are readily available to people if they choose.
Yeah.
So, word of advice, I try to be like uber customer service centric, but I have had to say no when somebody asked for like their 4th or 5th intake meeting and just said, once you sign on the dotted line, you got me. Until then, my ideas are kind of my product.
Yeah.
So sponsorship, what are some of the fun things we're doing with sponsorship? So a lot of the virtual venues have great things like carousels, sponsorship booths, letting you talk to sponsors direct. So much of it mirrors what you see at a traditional event. We're doing an event coming up soon where we're doing a virtual happy hour. So we actually let the sponsor write a couple of the questions for this interactive game we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's the, question number 10, it's the health question by Hospital XXX. What's the leading cause of this? Great. It's B, stop eating cheeseburgers. And, that message was brought to you by Hospital XXX. So I think you can find fun ways to integrate them. So much of it mirrors live events within virtual. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use what's out there. But we thought about that for that client. They were really happy. And it made me think of kind of like the old 1950 quiz shows. Geritol sponsors, da-da-da.
Yeah.
Just made me laugh. Cool. So that's
great.
what I got there.
That's cool. What last question here as we wrap up. What are 2 things that if someone is moving into or wants to do better at virtual events, what are 2 things they should really focus on to be able to nail the rest of the experience for their clients?
I would say first, graphics. We're very lucky. We have an in-house creative team, and they are so awesome. And when we looked at where we had to make, very tough cuts for amazing staff that have been with us for a long time, we were very limited and knew that our creative team really needed to stay intact.
Yeah.
Because within virtual, they were getting us through this. So the idea that you can take a client's logo and show them 3 or 4 cool graphics, transitions, lower thirds, whatever you need, figuring out the way to do that. Now, you don't have to be a graphics expert. You don't have to have an in-house creative to do that. You can go as easy as Fiverr or use graphics generators or use all of those things. But clients want to visually see that customization.
Yeah.
So I think everyone's going to have to up their graphic game a little bit because for all of us that never wanted to get into the broadcast world, we kind of all got pushed into the broadcast world.
Yep.
And then the next thing I would say is really, really tight call sheets and scripts. Hopefully a lot of you out there have been doing this for a long time, but I know plenty of my friends in the industry that are kind of like fly by the seat of their pants. They walk in, they go, who's going to be on stage? Okay, what type of mic do they want? And do they have a deck? That's all I need. The rest of the show, I got up here. That doesn't work. We do a lot of shows without callers. Our techs are, pretty badass. I love our techs.
Yeah.
And they don't always need that caller. Within the virtual world, we've been using callers on almost every show because we find that metronome of that somebody keeping that count and doing that call is really, really important in virtual. The toughest thing about virtual is you do a live event. You've got 2,000 people in a ballroom. You've got wine on the tables. You just had food. There's some entertainment, pretty lighting on the walls, cool things on the screen. Huge ballroom is impressive to be in. A mic doesn't work for a half a second. It's not good, but it's like, whatever. A video starts like all these things that I'm not saying are okay. I'm saying that from time to time, they've happened to all of us.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world.
Yep.
When it happens in virtual, it's the end of the world because all you have is what's inside that box. People are glued to that box. And the minute it's not exactly what's supposed to happen, I'm having a sip of my cocktail or I'm talking to the guy next to me.
Yeah.
All you're doing is sitting there going, come back.
Yeah. Saying, what the heck am I watching? What am I looking at?
Yeah, totally.
Wow. Okay. Well, awesome, dude. Thank you. My head is kind of swimming at the moment. There's so much, I was like here, I was above water, and now it's like, it's like I'm getting deeper. But dude, your insights are fantastic. I love the fact that you have a pulse and an understanding of what's really going on, what's working for you, what is working well, and what are ways that people can get better at what they're trying to do. So thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Always good to catch up with you. Always good to talk with you. And we're going to get through this together, man. Just, as a community, we will.
That we will. Thanks, buddy. Have a great day. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen today. I know that as a professional, each and every one of us want to be better tomorrow than we were today. That's why we've created the Gig Ready podcast. This is a place where professionals can come and look at what they're doing, look at how they're doing it, and get better every single day. We are solely value for value. We're not going to take corporate interests. We're not going to take sponsorship money. We want you to get better solely because that's what you want. So please give us some feedback. I want to get better. I want to create better podcasts. I want to create better events just like you do. So if you have some value you want to give back, ideas, thoughts, questions, even the ability to be a little critical at times, I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe out there and stay gig ready.